I'll let you know when it's live, inshallah.
No, I think we are.
I think so. We are live. Bismillah. I'll let you know when it's live, inshallah. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to 3 Shots of Espresso, a weekly podcast between myself, Anwar Jhetam, Sheikh Zakariyah Abrams, and also Brother Muhammad Ismail. Tonight it will just be 2 of us, myself and Sheikh Zakariyah. We're going to be speaking about, we're having a conversation about man and nature, whether it's a case of conquest or Khilafah. Muhammad Ismail would have really enjoyed this discussion because this week he just actually did the otter trail. We were looking forward to having him joining us, so we're looking forward perhaps in future to hear about his experiences on the otter trail, inshallah. But this discussion, especially since it's September currently, and in Southern Africa, usually that's supposed to be the start of spring, according to the solar calendar, given the fact that we're also in the Southern Hemisphere. So in the spirit of spring, in the spirit of environmentalism, let's get into this discussion about us and the natural world that God created. Sheikh Zakariyah, how are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah. Can't complain. Alhamdulillah. It's the night of Jumu'ah, so Alhamdulillah, it's a beautiful time, and inshallah, I'm really excited on this topic. As I told you that there were some readings that we had done, and we had 1 or 2 assignments on this topic, which I found very interesting, and I think so. There is still space for more research and discussions based on these topics. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered from this topic.
I think, when it comes to, let's say, especially when dealing with, let's say, the contemporary world, beyond just having answers to questions, still searching for answers, I think sometimes it's a case of even there's still questions that need to be asked. So while we're searching for answers, sometimes also in the search for knowledge, we're also searching for questions, because sometimes the more you, the more knowledge you encounter, the more questions you have. It will always be that unquenchable thirst that always leaves you with more and more questions. It would be very, very interesting. When we come into this, when we were speaking about, this idea of discussing man and nature, and Muhammad Ismail was also telling us that he'll be doing the otter trail, and what always comes to mind for me every time I think about us and nature, I think, how we are disconnected from the natural world as citizens of the modern world, especially those of us that live in urban areas, whether you're living in the city center itself or you're living in a suburb that's just outside of the city center. At the end of the day, the lives that we're living in are quite urban, compared to people that maybe that are living in the countryside, because either they live in a small or live in a farming community, a very agrarian society. Their relationship with nature would be very different. For us people in the city slickers, basically the one is disconnect, but also we need to reconnect with nature, through things like going for hikes, as an example, or fishing or camping or something like that. There is definitely a difference that you can feel within yourself. But when you look at how we as modern, let's say modern human beings are treating the world, you ask this fundamental question, is that all of this that Allah has created, do we want to control it and exploit it? Or is there some other way in which we're supposed to have a relationship with nature?
So I think 100% the first thing that you said, so you stay, let's take, for example, a place like Fort Worth in Mayfair, where we were staying. You randomly see, the most you'll see is a fly or, render a certain insect, not a lot. And when my children, when we moved to Botswana, the place that we were staying, the kids started seeing all these different type of insects because, and seeing lizards and all of that. And I know people really think that when they think of Botswana, they think of the bush in that, but it's such a beautiful place. And what happened was that I could see the change in my kids. For example, I'll give you an example. Like my kids would never on Eid day want to even touch, a sheep, for example, or something like that. But when they came here, they started getting this love for nature because it's all about nature here, and it's so true that it really does affect their way of looking at and getting involved with nature. So I just agree with you on that first point that you make, which I experienced myself with the kids and them interacting with nature.
Okay. But I mean, like, for example, generally, like, as Muslims, when we look at nature, because of the Quran, particularly, the way that the Quran references nature constantly, like, referring to ayat, signs in the creation of Allah. So like an ayat that comes to mind, like from Surah Al-Dhariyat, where Allah says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ, and in the earth are signs for those who have certainty in faith. And then the next ayah even says, like, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, and even within yourselves there are signs. But why do you not see? Do you not see them? Do you not think? And the word that's used, tubsirun, I mean, we can link it to basira, that deep insight, that deep thinking. So when we look at nature, is the usual story that we hear, but it's still quite profound in that you're looking at nature and you're seeing signs of the Creator. And the more time you spend, like, let's say, engaged in the creation of Allah, looking at the signs that are all pointing back to Him. I mean, one, it strengthens you in faith, but also, let's say for people that are still finding the way towards Allah, right, in different ways, they might have a similar experience like Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. For example, and we all know the story, is that he looks at elements in nature, the stars, the moon, the sun, and because he's trying, this is a search for God, right? And every one of these elements rises and sets and fades away, and each time he's dissatisfied with it. But then eventually he comes to this conclusion, and Allah guides him to this conclusion that there is a being beyond these natural beings, that's the creator of all of these natural things, and that is God, and that's who you worship. And when we immerse ourselves in nature, that's where the hope is that we should be experiencing that kind of a realization. But sometimes when I think about this here, and while that, please go ahead.
Yeah, so just on the point that you're making of nature, and that is why I picked up one of the scholars who I found extremely interesting in terms of, although her one book is called Animals in the Quran, right? And her name is Sarra Tlili, and she's an assistant professor in the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of Florida. And she goes into an ecocentric reading of the Quran. And ecocentric here would mean that she goes into environmental issues. Now, there's certain words that she uses which I found very interesting. So she went into an ecocentric reading of the Quran, and then she said that the focus was to bring a theocentric, that the Quran is theocentric, meaning that having Allah as the central focus. And the reason for this here is that we later come on that, you know, in interpretation of man and scholars that came on later, that shifted this meaning of Khalifa, which is the vicegerent or successor. And humans were given a certain type of superiority. And the problem doesn't, so in the Quran, you find verses, for example, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُم, you know, we have honored the children of Adam, right? And we have blessed him, or you know, with abundance. And you find verses like, for example, so what happened is this superiority started making certain interpretations that humans are superior and everything else is inferior. And that is why she went into this theocentric, to bring Allah back as the most powerful, the creator, and everybody else is the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though you might have certain duties or certain obligations or certain favors bestowed to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not mean that you are in control of anything. And I give the example of, I was thinking of this example, for example, in your family, right? You have your children. They are at your service, meaning that you can send them to fetch for you something, which we call taskhir, you know, taskhir, they under your subjugation. Get me a glass of water, bring me this from the fridge, go and do this, go to the shop for me. And they do your, I mean, you know, they serve you, they serve you. But does that mean that you have authority to do as you please with them? You understand? Does that mean that you have authority to do as you please with them? You know? So similarly, like I was saying, so, and then she said, one of the things that we need to abstain from is the anthropocentric approach, which is looking down on nature. And she made some beautiful points where she said the Quran strongly suggests that the natural world engages with Allah in ways that are deeply meaningful, yet generally inaccessible to humans. And this is not her words, this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, تُسَبِّحُ لَهُ السَّمَاوَاتُ السَّبْعُ وَالْأَرْضُ وَمَنْ فِيهِنْ وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. You know, that the seven heavens and earth, together with whatever creation is within them, glorify him. There is nothing that doesn't glorify his praises, but you don't understand their glorification. So, subhanAllah, this gives us, it means that the Quran, like you said, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And I feel that it's more of it elevates you in spirituality if you focus on nature with this love and this uniqueness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in nature. It's correct what you're saying. It can elevate your status. Carry on.
But on this point, right, you're saying having a theocentric lens, basically having a God-centered perspective of the world. So even when you're looking at nature, you're looking at it that you're looking at nature with the idea of seeing the creator, right, behind the creation, right?
Correct.
So when it comes to, like, for example, and this is the very famous ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, part of the ayah reads as Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, right? Everyone loves this ayah, right? That where Allah says, indeed, I want to appoint a vicegerent, I want to make a vicegerent on earth. Now, whether we translate the word khalifa as vicegerent, steward, successor, the translation aside, the idea that basically what really gets this conversation going is that this word khalifa. Okay, now here we're not talking about, like, our the last caliph of the Muslim world, from 1924. What was it, Sultan Abdul Hamid II? Or Abu Bakr Baghdadi in Iraq, who did like a, with the ISIS crisis, they declared him the Khalif. We're not talking about that Khalif. We are talking about the idea that mankind has a will be living on earth, and this is a vicegerent, or let's use this word, vicegerent.
To put it in simple terms, to put it in simple terms, as God's deputy, Allah's deputy.
Yeah, it's contentious, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm going to say contentious because we had that discussion, right?
I'm just giving a meaning. I'm not saying. I'm just giving the meaning.
I'm with you because at which point do we? Let's say when we're talking about vicegerency, successorship, stewardship. Let's say being Khalifa, Khulafa, right? Do we go from being like, let's say, humble servants of God, right, to having this kind of attitude that we speak for God? Right.
And right.
So even then, like, let's say there's this top-down kind of approach to the rest of creation. And for me, that can be a little bit dangerous if you don't know your place, because then even the way you're going to start to treat the natural world, and we're talking here about the environment, it's about subjugation, exploitation. We are conquering nature, So like, for example, speaking of Muhammad Ismail is again, and he's absent, right? We used to use a certain hiking, let's say a hiking venue in Joburg as a base, right? We used to even refer to it as the home base, right? And we used to do different trails there in the run up to his otter, right? And the idea is that we are going to conquer this trail. But one while we're marching along, and I'm thinking, no, man, you can't be talking about conquest here, because we engage in the natural world. Yeah, sure, it's nice to do these trails faster. You want to do the ones with more inclines. Then you might be feeling a little bit adventurous and you want to go further. It's beautiful, but you never actually conquer in nature. What you're rather doing is that you flow in with it. If you're discharging your duty, towards nature correctly.
Which is an excellent observation.
Go ahead.
Subhanallah. It's an excellent observation. And I think so. Well, the problem here that came with these meanings, like you said, the contentions around God, deputy, or vicegerent, or successor, is something which she discusses in a book, and a few other scholars have discussed it. And in fact, if you go through some of the exegesis or the Mufassirun, for example, like Al-Qurtubi, Fakhruddin al-Razi, Ibn Kathir, Imam Tabari, if you go through Ibn Ashur, all of these Mufassirun, and you look at Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, you will find that the earliest Quranic exegetes seem to have understood that this word as succession of previous generations. And now, obviously, succession, so the succession, say, Adam, and then after that, the generation after that, and after that. And obviously, some of them give the meaning of Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, that there were, before the creation of Sayyidina Adam, there were these genes that were staying on earth, and they caused corruption. And that is why some have translated it as dima, that they will flow bloodshed. So there's different interpretations to Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. So what happened was that the main thing is that the early exegetes, they looked at it and said that this word here is succession. And what happened is that some of the scholars mentioned that the rise of the Umayyad Caliphate, this is now 30 years after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this word began to acquire new connotations. So what happened was, it started getting
political climate, right?
Right, the political climate. So it began to get meanings of, and that's where now I'm pulling out that word Khalifatullah. You see?
Yeah, the concept. Yeah, the steward of God, right?
The steward of God, right? And then and then the debate went on amongst the scholars, and they said, no, it's better to say Khalifatu Rasulillah, right?
No.
So the successor of the Prophet of Allah, right? But whether it was this,
and that was the title of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq,
Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. That's what I'm saying to you. This is what the debate went on, and said, no, it has to stick to this meaning here. But the question that came was whether it is successor, whether it is deputy, whether it is vicegerency, stewardship, all of these meanings. But the main question was that it did not give anybody, nobody enjoyed the authority of either the Prophet or of Allah in terms of, the clear understanding of mankind and that authority. So
right.
That was the meaning that was there. But later on, this meaning in contemporary, in modern, modern scholars, for example, one of the scholars she named Dr. Rashad Khalifa, who later on started giving humans this type of superiority. And you see this, and sometimes you even see it in scholars, for example, and we mentioned this here, who feel that it's my way or the highway. This is the correct. This is what God or Allah wanted, and my interpretation is the best of interpretations. There's nothing beyond this here. It's the most superior. It's the most.
Framing is very important.
Carry on. What were you saying?
No, but I'm following you. Basically, it's the framing of this word that has, let's say, very, very, extreme consequences, right? So let's say even when we're looking at the entire issue of us and how we engage nature, right? Because this word doesn't just apply to the idea of, let's say, just to the natural world. It has socio-political, economic, religious connotations, right? So even when we're looking at, let's say, Islamic environmental ethics, right? Which is really, I think, very much embedded into the idea of being Khilafah or a Khalif on earth, right? The idea of vicegerency or successor. And we have all of these amazing ayat of the Quran that's constantly telling us, look at nature, see this creation, ponder over it. Think of the data behind the creation, right? You have to really grasp the word quite correctly to be able to grasp, let's say, our ethical framework that we're going to base on Islam concerning nature itself. Look, I'm still of this opinion that we are living lives particularly as urban citizens, right? That's quite divorced from nature, and that's really unfortunate. But if you have the right conception of what nature is, the two ideas: do you conquer it, exploit it, use the earth, to its absolute maximum, and totally destroy it? And this is the idea of ecocide. So you have suicide and you have ecocide. Ecologically, you killing yourself, right? You popping your pills, you jumping off, let's say, a tower, simply because you're not looking after the earth. Or the idea of that you engage the natural creation, you benefit from it, so you can use it in the manufacture of goods and items. You can live off the land, right? But also constantly you plowing back, investing back into the natural world. So you're taking care of endangered species. You taking care of, let's say, endangered plants. You're making sure that alien invasions. I'm not talking about extraterrestrials. I'm talking about in terms of plants, right?
Correct.
There's certain plants where they're not supposed to be, they're not there. So you don't destroy the natural habitat or let's say, the natural habitat of an area. You maintain that balance. The Quran talks about the idea of mizan. look, Allah is
Correct.
ultimately in charge of the mizan, but we have to play our part. So the framing, I feel, is very, very important.
100%. And going back again to the ecocentric and theocentric, one of the things that you will find is that, you know, one of the tafsir is Al-Quran, you know, makes tafsir. So other verses of the Quran give elucidation to or clarification to other verses of the Quran, right? So when you look at Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, and you're looking at okay, so say for example, even if we say that human being has been favored, you know, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, you know, but then ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. He can become
he will return to the lowest of the low.
The lowest of the low, all right? So you can become the highest of the high, the most beautiful of beauty, the most, you know, revered, and you can become the lowest of the low. And so you look at verses which speaks about nature, and you find where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not commit abuse on the earth, spreading corruption, you know. And then you have another verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not desire corruption in the land. Indeed, God does not like corruptors.
No.
And that is why even when scholars are quoting the verse, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى. You know?
Inclinations. Right.
That word khalifa, it comes with inclination, your desire, you know? So like these verses, and that is why, you know, you go into the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and you look at the ahadith on nature, where the Prophet ﷺ is showing us this. So this is also an ecocentric way of reading the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ and looking at, you know, how did he treat nature? And this is the Prophet of Allah, you know. And you find in one of the hadith in the Musnads or in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ says, if a Muslim plants a tree or sows seed, and then a bird or a person or an animal eats from it, it is regarded as a charitable gift. This is inciting, you know.
Beautiful.
You know, one day the Prophet passed by Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas while he was performing wudu. The Prophet ﷺ asked Sa'ad, and this is mentioned in Ibn Majah. He asked Sa'ad, what is this wastage? Sa'ad replied, is there wastage in wudu also? The Prophet ﷺ said, yes, even if you are at a flowing river. Subhanallah. You know, so then it gives clarification to the meaning of the word Khalifa, you know, in terms of your spirituality, your increase in morality, you know. So I don't know, what do you take of that?
Well, you know, a lot of things are coming through my mind, right? But I like that one, when you engage in nature, you don't waste nature. So like, let's say, for example, the Sahaba Sa'ad, right? Radiallahu anh, is making wudu, and wudu, I mean, it's, you know, wudu is a to salah, but wudu itself is an act of worship, right? That whole, the ritual purification itself is an act of worship before even the worship, right? It's beautiful.
Right.
So even in that, you know what, the idea that while you're being pious, don't be wasteful, you know, of the natural gift of the. I think for people that, I mean, we know the Hijaz, right? And modern nation states that exist in that that geographical area, like Saudi Arabia, Mecca and Medina located there. I mean, desert areas, right? I mean, Mecca is an oasis city. Medina, while it's an agrarian, originally was an agrarian settlement, at the end of the day, in the middle of it, right? So water, I mean, would be extremely important. And we know, you know, we always say the Sharia is life, but one of the meanings of Sharia means basically a pathway towards water. Since we are talking about, you know, we're engaging in etymology, a pathway towards water. So if, for example, you
How many
use
times you heard
water.
that in Egypt?
Oh,
How many times you heard that?
plenty. And then people
Carry
will
on.
convince you to drink from the Nile also at the same time, you know.
And tell you, once you drink from the Nile, you will always, I think so it's true. You always get that. I mean, you yourself, you probably get now and then that, you know, nostalgic feeling to go back to
Oh, yeah.
Egypt. You know, you just, I mean, it was just such a blessed environment for knowledge. You can't compare.
Friday morning, I get up, right? And just before I woke up, I had a dream. And in my dream, you know what I'm seeing? There was a certain man that worked at Shabrawi or just off Mustafa and Nahas Street, right? You know where's Manhad, right? So I used to have a habit of eating basically full with eggs almost every morning. I used to basically have breakfast there, right?
Right.
And basically, Ibrahim always used to see me in the morning. He would take my order, serve me my breakfast, right? We'd have a little bit of a chat. I'd eat breakfast, and then on my way out, I just greet him, and I'm on my way out, right? And I see him clearly in my dream, and he's sitting with a group of people in his Shabrawi uniform. And he's telling them, he's having some conversation about food and right. And when I woke up, the thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to eat food, right? Fava beans, for those who don't know what we're talking about, right? This is a staple diet of Egypt. I wanted to eat food with rustic bread and have eggs, boiled or fried, but that's what I wanted to do. And I'm sitting here in Joburg and I'm like, there's no Shabrawi anywhere here. I have to make a trip back. So yeah, you always want to go back.
Even the food that they have in the cans is not the same. It doesn't taste the same.
No, it's not. You have to go back. You have to go back. On this here,
all right.
Here's something to think about, right? When I think about the relationship with nature that Allah wants us to have, where one, we engage in it, we see in His signs, we're thinking about Him, but we're using it to love life, because we have to love life. That had to do with basically environmentalism, and they even went into architecture about how Muslim cities were designed, and it had a very natural flow, right? And natural materials were used, and the idea of constantly taking advantage of natural light, right? And even how basically the ancient Muslims had used the aqueduct system, right? To ensure that one, they could irrigate land. So that means they could actually farm. They could actually engage successfully in farming. That means they could feed a large population of people. So cities could actually grow. What you constantly see was this respect for nature and basically using it. So when I think about, for example, how we build in, how we live in, the cars we drive in now, and sometimes I think, let's say if the destiny of this ummah was not disrupted, to the condition that we at now, would we have had, let's say, renewable energy sources for vehicles, maybe even 50 years ago, and we're already using that, in a way that, let's say, our cars are not powered by fossil fuels, which are damaging the environment, but it's powered by, let's say, solar energy or by some other form of renewable energy. So that as we speeding around, our cities, we're not actually contributing towards ecocide, and the closest, let's say, modern day representation that comes to my mind when I think of this, and it's fictional, right? But let's say there's no pious pretensions here. Think of the movie Wakanda. Right? How people had found basically a certain natural resource, and they had used this natural resource to power up basically the entire civilization, and yet they seem like they were in touch with nature. If you haven't seen Wakanda, I suggest you go and watch it.
And let me on that. Let me ask you something. We're discussing of
Actually, I made a mistake. The movie is called Black Panther. Sorry. Wakanda is the place in the movie. The movie is called Black Panther.
I know the leading actor passed on.
Yeah,
a good guy.
He was a good guy. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, and this is what went through my mind. I just want to see what's your take on this. Speaking of nature, and what about pesticide in it? Like going into the shop and buying a can of doom, and let's just say you find a spider web in the corner of your house, and you just come and you spray the doom. You find maybe an ant built a house on the corner of your door, and you just come and take a hammer or something and you just break it down, and there probably is a colony of ants in there. You have a beehive maybe on your tree, and you call these guys to come and burn it down, and it burns the tree down also just for you to clear all of that stuff. We kill a fly with no remorse. We trample a spider with no remorse. So I just want to see what is your take on that, because that is part of nature.
Absolutely. And I think that's as real as it gets, particularly for urban citizens, right? So, I mean, before we can even talk about, like, let's say having little environment, recycling practices at home, where we're going to do some things like separate our tin cans that we would have chucked in the bin. We're going to separate that from the plastic, and the plastic from the paper, which is natural stuff we should be doing, right? It's no problem to do that, and really we should. And glass is something that's totally 100% recyclable, right? We should be doing that. But I think when it comes to, like, let's say insects, right? Is the example you're using, I think it really should be based on need, isn't it? Because, like, let's say if your insect colony, your little ant colony is in your garden on your grass, right? That may not necessarily be the end of the world. When it becomes a big problem is that when basically ants, and they're very hardworking creatures of Allah, basically have come up through the tiles of your house, then you got a problem. Then you might need to think about, like, gassing them out. But if they're in your garden, leave them in.
This one on that, I read a joke which was in Setswana,
Yeah. Okay.
So this guy wrote that he had a picture of, like, I think so it was a beetle or something like that. And he said that he picked it. Let me give you an example of it. He said he picked it up in Lens and he gave it a ride to Joburg, right? So he kept it in the car until Joburg, and then he let it fly. So someone wrote in the comments, the poor children and wife are waiting for him to come back home. Maybe he went out to bring some food. And you took the poor insect to Joburg, and his family is waiting for him in land to come back home and drink. So that's what I'm saying to you. We need to ask ourselves this question, because there was a guy in where we were training, and a spider came on the bench, and one of the guys was about to smack the spider, like, to kill him.
Right.
And this guy went out of his way to stop him, and he said, "No, you can't do that. That's a creation of God." And I found that to be very spiritual.
SubhanAllah, that's amazing.
That's amazing. It really shows how deep it really tells how deep is our connection with nature, that you even try to avoid hurting the ants. لا يحطمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. Allah mentions of the ant, and what he said just showed that it's significant, because Allah mentions it in the Quran, and he even mentions the sentence which is said to the other ants. So
the army of Suleiman is coming.
The army of Suleiman is coming. And Suleiman smiled when he heard this. I mean, so it just breaks down to us this whole topic of how important it is to observe nature and get ourselves out of that anthropocentric state of mind where we believe that we are superior, because even this quality of superiority, even as a man of the household, it could break down the family. Because if you have this notion in your head that you are the authority, you know, it breaks down communication. Your children won't come and communicate with you because, you know, your spouse won't be able to communicate with you. There's no compromising, you know. So human beings, I think so it's a very important aspect of this Khalifa is thinking of yourselves as being favored by Allah. And this is one piece I wanted to read that she wrote, which I found very interesting. She mentioned that sometimes I found this part here very interesting. She said, let me just. So she said one of the things that she mentioned. She said, although the Mufassirun have, you know, like tried to show some of the favors which Allah has bestowed humans to believe that we are favorable. So, for example, serviceability of all creation, right? Serviceability, the cow, the sheep. You find a small boy pulling a whole, pulling a whole flock of sheep following, for example, or a herd of cows are at his service. Or the camel, when you come, such a huge animal, and it kneels down for you to sit on. So the serviceability of all creation. And then obviously we can travel on land and sea, we can deal in finances, we have language, we have senses, we can taste food, we can take a mango and, you know, make 100 things from that mango, you know. So we have this type of intellect, you know, so all of these things. And the amazing part is that she brings Imam Qurtubi in this discussion to block that sense that because you'll have all of these bounties, don't let it confuse your mind to think that you are superior to of human being and nature. It's a unique distinction. And I wrote this down here, that Imam Qurtubi says that rather, the great distinction is of the human being's rationality, of recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of fulfilling all of his commandments. That is much more of a uniqueness, and that we can call something which is of a high status. Which because when you have those qualities, automatically your respect and your love for nature comes with that, you know. And she mentioned a beautiful.
That's very deep, eh?
It's very deep. It doesn't, because she mentions, if you saying I'm unique because of these qualities, okay, a horse can run faster than you. There's a bird which looks right into the sea and then it catches a fish from the air. It's able to move with the speed of the fish and calculate what speed it needs to go down to pull out that fish from the water.
True.
So animals also have unique bounties which humans don't have. You know.
But you were saying, right? Like, let's say, when you're thinking about it, just to wrap up our discussion, how would you say that we need to reconnect with nature? You know, I mean, for me, the idea of, okay, one, be conscious of how you consume, what you consume, how you consume, right? So this is from the foods you eat to the electronics you buy.
I think so. We've got about 3-4 minutes left.
Okay, cool. So, you know, from the electronics that we buy, basically all the consumer goods, the ways in which we're traveling, right? We need to be conscientious of these type of things, right? Because they all leave basically an environmental footprint. Unfortunately, a lot of the let's say the environmental footprint that we live in is not all like, recyclable and harmless on the environment, right? It has a devastating side effect on the environment. Basically, it's ecocide. We kill in the earth, and in the process, we kill in ourselves, right?
Right.
So, how do we reconnect with nature? As urban citizens, what do you think?
I think so. One of the things mentioned again by this author, Sarra, which I found, which was very profound. She said, privilege status is contingent or dependent on moral and religious uprightness.
Okay.
In obeying the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she mentioned the second thing is the entire creation is cherished. Once you bring that into your understanding, all right, which is again an ecocentric. So we need to shift the way we look at nature. Firstly, like Imam Ghazali says, in order for you to kill a disease or to kill a sin, you need to find the root of that sin or that disease. All right. So similarly here, it's for us to go back again and look at how nature is being addressed and create that love for nature. And I think so once we can create that love and respect for nature, automatically our ways that we treat and so, it probably would reduce some of the stuff that we know that could affect nature. I mean, the world is carrying on. Not everybody is going to follow and protect nature and stop the cutting of trees and pollution and all of this stuff, and certain things which we see. Not everybody, but as an individual and for every person, and the soul is linked to the environment. I was just reading that like how 85 or 90% of the or 75% of the earth is liquid, and the other is dry. So rivers and seas and all of that. Similarly, in the human, 75% of these is liquid, and the other 25% is, and that is why you see all of the ingredients that you get in water. Similarly, the human being is in need of those ingredients. And we speak about the ayyamul bid, the white days. And the reason for that is that if you look at the connection which the moon has, and some of the psychologists have even spoken of a person gets more angry in those days. Some people's anger increases, and that is why the Prophet ﷺ commanded us to fast in order to calm you down. So that is their opinion on those days. But it just shows the connection. It shows the connection of mankind with nature. The air that we breathe. All of that. So coming down again to the point. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Rabb al-Alamin, of the entire world, not only of human beings, the entire creation. And like we said, the entire creation is loved by Allah. To sabbihu lahu. They glorify Him, So I think so when we reach the reality and understanding of that, that's where every individual would, in his capacity, try to respect and protect nature. That's my opinion.
I like what you're saying, because I mean that basically that cognitive framework, right, that you basically described, right, that filters into the practical things of like how we're going to recycle, how we choose to travel, the foods that we try to eat. Also, for example, do we, let's say keep buying basically cheap plastic items that you use it and dispose, or are you going to look at things that are made of more sturdier material that last for a longer time, and then you have it in your mind that I'm going to invest in something that I don't have to constantly replace, because by constantly replacing it, I'm basically just contributing towards, let's say, more pollution, or let's say more industrial waste pollution, basically, because climate change is real. I think also, as we're wrapping up, you mentioned about the Ayyamul Bid, the white days of the month, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of every Islamic month. And we just started Safar, the month of Safar, the second month on the calendar. I think one of the ways, besides actually going out in nature, whether it be walks, hikes, camps, fishing trips, swimming in the ocean, rivers, and things like that, besides those kind of things, which are necessary, because, a good amount of time spent in nature, I mean, there's positive effects on a human being, psychologically, physically. It's fantastic. But I think one of the things that we can do on a practical level as Muslims is that towards the end of every Islamic month, right? And I know Uqsa always encourages people to do this, is that go out to look for the moon.
Look at
seriously.
Go
out to look for the moon on what is supposed to be like, let's say, the 29th
SubhanAllah,
night.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. You can ask yourself, how many people really just go out? How many people just go out and look at the stars, for example, and just observe the stars in nature? SubhanAllah, it is your connection with nature to look at it,
And on a daily basis, like another thing, and this will be like almost my concluding comment, is that one, at the end of an Islamic month, you're looking out for the new moon, to that will signal the birth of a new Islamic month, from one to the next, like we move from Muharram to Safar. The other thing would be, for example, on a daily basis, is that knowing when the awqat of Salah come in, right? Not just based on the adhan of your local mosque or the app on your phone, right? But rather like the actual time that prayer sets in. So like, for example, that like I was checking up the other day, if Fajr sets in at, like, let's say 4:55, and maybe your local adhan goes off at, say, 5:15 or 5:30, but that at 4:55, there's going to be a change in light in the natural environment that will signal the prayer time before even the muadhin does his duty. And at 6:13, for example, the sun's going to come up, so it's game over. If you haven't prayed Fajr by then, it's finished, and that when the next prayer time sets in, when does Asr actually set in, just like, now and then checking these things out. And maybe every once in a while is that actually have a look outside to see the changing of the color of day, because of the sun, as the sun basically moves through the horizon, you will see changes. Correct. And if you do this for a while, eventually all those signs that we read in our fiqh books about, you'll know that it's a dhuhr when the sun is this color, and when the sun is setting, then you'll know we are approaching Asr. And when the sky is like, has a whitish light on the western horizon, that's the last point at which you can pray Maghrib. You'll start to actually observe those. That may be one of the ways in which, over a period of time, we can actually reconnect with nature as people that are living very urban lives, besides the recycling that we all should be doing.
Correct. Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-'asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr.
Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilu s-salihat wa tawasaw bil-haqq wa tawasaw bis-sabr. Shukran, Sheikh Zakariyah. Wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.